What you're about to witness isn't just about prison food. In the darkest corners of cells across America, Britain, and Australia, gangs control not just the yard, but what inmates eat, when they eat, and who survives. A missing tray can spark violence. A stolen dessert can mark you for life. This is survival, but not the kind you've ever imagined. Prisons are often painted in statistics and official reports, but the reality is far more intricate and far more chilling. Beyond bars and fences lies a micro-society governed by rules that are unwritten, invisible, yet ruthlessly enforced. Gangs dictate meals, alliances, and punishments, wielding food as power. Across 3 continents, research reveals a common thread. Food isn't just nourishment, it's a tool of control. In the United States, studies by the Bureau of Justice and criminologists like Haney show that commissary access and meal allocation are pivotal in maintaining gang influence. In the UK, Ministry of Justice reports indicate that gang hierarchies directly impact which inmates eat well and who scrapes by. In Australia, Corrective Services research highlights how hunger and privilege intersect with gang loyalty, influencing mental health and violence. This isn't just about survival. It's about the psychology of power, control, and adaptation under extreme confinement. Hunger, hierarchy, and control. Inside a prison, the cafeteria is more than a place to eat. It's a battleground. Every tray served is a small microcosm of the social order. Gangs assign who eats first, who gets seconds, and who must wait, sometimes indefinitely. Psychologists such as Craig Haney and researchers from the NIJ highlight that control over basic needs, like food, is one of the most potent levers of dominance. When an inmate knows their next meal could depend on obedience, fear, or submission, the mind begins to adapt in ways outsiders can hardly comprehend. Consider the account of an inmate in a California federal prison. When he tried to bypass the gang line for extra food, he was isolated for 3 days. Psychologically, this enforced submission and vigilance, teaching him that survival was less about strength and more about reading invisible rules. Across Britain and Australia, similar patterns emerge. Inmates report that sharing food is rarely a simple act of kindness. It's a strategic move. Those who hoard or betray face social and sometimes physical consequences. Researchers at the Chicago Crime Lab describe this as a microcosm of societal hierarchy intensified by scarcity. Hunger amplifies existing power structures and cements gang authority. The psychological impact is profound. Constant negotiation, calculation, and vigilance reshapes behavior. Some inmates develop hyper-awareness and strategic compliance. Others succumb to stress, anxiety, or even mental withdrawal. Over time, the brain rewires itself to survive in this small but merciless world. Hunger, hierarchy, and control. Inside a prison, the cafeteria is more than a place to eat. It's a battleground. Every tray served is a small microcosm of the social order. Gangs assign who eats first, who gets seconds, and who must wait, sometimes indefinitely. Psychologists such as Craig Haney and researchers from the NIJ highlight that control over basic needs, like food, is one of the most potent levers of dominance. When an inmate knows their next meal could depend on obedience, fear, or submission, the mind begins to adapt in ways outsiders can hardly comprehend. Consider the account of an inmate in a California federal prison. When he tried to bypass the gang line for extra food, he was isolated for 3 days. Psychologically, this enforced submission and vigilance, teaching him that survival was less about strength and more about reading invisible rules. Across Britain and Australia, similar patterns emerge. Inmates report that sharing food is rarely a simple act of kindness. It's a strategic move. Those who hoard or betray face social and sometimes physical consequences. Researchers at the Chicago Crime Lab describe this as a microcosm of societal hierarchy intensified by scarcity. Hunger amplifies existing power structures and cements gang authority. The psychological impact is profound. Constant negotiation, calculation, and vigilance reshapes behavior. Some inmates develop hyper-awareness and strategic compliance. Others succumb to stress, anxiety, or even mental withdrawal. Over time, The brain rewires itself to survive in this small but merciless world. Commissary economies, bartering survival. Beyond the cafeteria, another form of control emerges, the prison commissary. Here, inmates are no longer just surviving on what's served, they're navigating a shadow economy where food, hygiene products, and even small luxuries become currency. In the United States, Bureau of Justice reports reveal that commissary spending patterns often reflect gang hierarchies and alliances. An inmate with more commissary privileges may secure protection, influence, or favors. Conversely, those without access are pushed deeper into dependency, forced to trade or beg to survive. One inmate in a medium-security California prison described how a single pack of ramen noodles could dictate social interactions for an entire week. If you had it, you could negotiate favors, settle debts, or curry favor with a gang. If you didn't, you risked ostracism or intimidation. In Britain, research by the Ministry of Justice illustrates similar dynamics. Items as small as a chocolate bar or a single packet of crisps became markers of status and loyalty. Prisoners quickly learned that survival wasn't just physical, it was strategic and social. The commissary is a lens into human behavior under pressure, who will exploit, who will cooperate, and who will be crushed by circumstance. Australia's corrective services studies echo these findings. Inmates who master the commissary system often gain a psychological advantage. The ability to trade, anticipate shortages, and leverage scarce goods cultivates mental resilience and cunning, skills that are essential in a setting where traditional power structures are inverted and survival depends on reading human behavior at a glance. Psychologists such as Irwin and Haney note that these interactions, though seemingly mundane, create high-stakes social learning. Inmates are constantly testing boundaries. Will this trade lead to safety, or does it invite retaliation? Will sharing food create loyalty, or will it be used against you? The commissary becomes more than a store. It is a classroom in human psychology, a place where fear, strategy, and social intelligence collide with the most basic of human needs, nourishment. The psychological toll, hunger, scarcity, and survival. Hunger in prison is rarely just physical. It is psychological, social, and profoundly controlling. Researchers at the National Institute of Justice, NIJ, and psychologists like Craig Haney highlight that scarcity amplifies stress, anxiety, and aggression, reshaping inmate behavior in ways that extend far beyond the cafeteria. Inmates quickly learn that every bite of food, or lack thereof, carries social consequences. In gang-controlled wings, going without a meal isn't merely uncomfortable, it is a signal of vulnerability. Vulnerability invites exploitation. One former inmate from a UK high-security facility described skipping meals under gang intimidation. When you don't eat, everyone knows it. You become less than human in their eyes. Every eye is on you. In America, studies of California and Texas prisons reveal that inmates who consistently face food scarcity experience heightened hypervigilance, constantly scanning the environment, assessing potential threats, and calculating how to navigate social hierarchies. Over time, the brain adapts to scarcity, heightening anxiety and reactivity. Australia's corrective research confirms a similar phenomenon. Food scarcity triggers not only psychological stress but physical manifestations: insomnia, irritability, and cognitive fatigue. Inmates report difficulty concentrating on work assignments, counseling sessions, or personal rehabilitation because survival becomes the primary focus. The psychology of adaptation under these conditions is fascinating. Some inmates respond by strategically aligning with powerful groups, ensuring access to food and protection. Others withdraw, relying on mental fortitude and patience to endure. A study by the Chicago Crime Lab describes this as microcosmic social Darwinism, a survival strategy that rewards adaptability, social intelligence, and restraint over brute force. Even simple acts of eating are laden with calculation and tension. Choosing when and where to eat, who to share with, or whether to trade food are decisions that can determine social standing, safety, and mental stability. Over months and years, these patterns ingrain themselves into personality and behavior, leaving a lasting imprint on inmate psyche. This is where power and survival intersect. Food is no longer just a basic need. It becomes a tool of influence, dominance, and mental shaping. Inmates are constantly navigating a landscape where the smallest morsel can dictate alliances, enforce loyalty, or spark conflict. Coping mechanisms, survival strategies under gang control. In a world where food is power, inmates develop complex coping strategies to survive both physically and psychologically. These strategies are shaped not by choice, but by necessity, by the relentless rules of scarcity and social hierarchy. One common mechanism is social calculation. Inmates quickly learn to read others, who can be trusted, who is likely to enforce gang rules, and who will exploit generosity. A former inmate from a California medium security facility recalled, "If you share the wrong food with the wrong person, it can come back to bite you. You learn to give carefully or not at all." Another adaptation is resource manipulation. Small items from the commissary, ramen noodles, sugar packets, or even toothpaste become bargaining chips. Inmates trade these for protection, information, or favors. Australian studies from corrective services describe this as a micromarket, where psychological acuity is as valuable as physical strength. Mental compartmentalization is also crucial. According to research by Haney and Irwin, inmates often separate their emotional responses from their actions, allowing them to endure humiliation, hunger, or intimidation without losing their capacity to function. This coping mechanism preserves mental stability in an environment designed to erode it. Some inmates adopt rituals and routines to create a sense of control. In British prisons, Ministry of Justice studies show that even the order of consuming food, what to eat first, what to save, and what to share, is treated as a strategy for survival and social alignment. These small rituals reduce anxiety and reinforce a sense of predictability in a chaotic environment. Others rely on social alliances, forming protective networks to shield themselves from scarcity's psychological effects. But these alliances are double-edged. Loyalty can be enforced violently, and betrayal has immediate consequences. Psychologists at the Chicago Crime Lab describe this as a constant negotiation between trust and survival, where every interaction carries risk. Finally, there is adaptation through acceptance. Some inmates focus on long-term survival rather than immediate gain, choosing to endure hunger or limited meals to avoid conflict. Studies from the NIJ show that this approach reduces incidents of violence and psychological breakdown but requires extraordinary self-discipline and patience. In every prison examined, whether in the US, UK, or Australia, these coping strategies reveal a simple truth: survival is both mental and physical. Food is a lever of control, but the mind becomes the ultimate tool for enduring it. Long-term psychological consequences of food control and gang influence. The effects of gang-controlled food systems in prisons extend far beyond daily survival. Over months and years, these dynamics leave lasting psychological imprints on inmates, shaping behavior, perception, and social interaction long after meals are consumed. Researchers like Craig Haney and studies from the NIJ highlight that constant exposure to scarcity, social hierarchy, and manipulation creates chronic stress. This isn't the stress of a single difficult situation. It's continuous, pervasive, and inescapable. Inmates report heightened vigilance, hyperawareness, and a tendency to anticipate threats in every interaction. Even after release, these patterns can persist, affecting trust, decision-making, and emotional regulation. In the United States, former inmates describe post-incarceration difficulties such as food anxiety, an overvaluation of resources, hyperconsciousness about scarcity, and lingering social calculation. One California ex-inmate reflected, "Even after leaving prison, I still think about what I eat, when I eat it, and who might be watching." In Britain, Ministry of Justice follow-up studies show that the psychological conditioning around sharing and hoarding often translates into difficulty forming social bonds outside prison. Individuals conditioned to see food and resources as instruments of negotiation struggle with everyday cooperation in society. Australia's corrective services research notes long-term mental health consequences, including anxiety disorders, compulsive behaviors, and heightened sensitivity to social hierarchies. These psychological scars are reinforced by years of navigating gang-enforced scarcity, where survival depended on vigilance, strategic alliances, and careful management of limited resources. Additionally, the Chicago Crime Lab emphasizes that prolonged exposure to these stressors can reshape moral reasoning and ethical judgment. In a setting where food is power, inmates must constantly weigh self-preservation against cooperation, leading to adaptive but morally complex behavior. These adaptations, while effective in prison, can create challenges when reintegrating into communities where rules are less rigid and social hierarchies less extreme. Ultimately, what emerges is a paradoxical survival psychology. Inmates become highly strategic, socially aware, and resilient, but also deeply conditioned by an environment where every decision about a meal carries risk. Hunger and scarcity are not just physical stressors. They are tools of psychological shaping, molding cognition, behavior, and identity. Micropolitics of food, power, influence, and negotiation. Within prison walls, every meal is more than nourishment. It is a micropolitical battlefield. Inmates constantly negotiate alliances, favors, and influence, often using food as both currency and leverage. This is particularly evident in gang-controlled wings, where the distribution of meals reflects the subtle power hierarchies that govern inmate life. Studies from the NIJ and observations by Irwin and Haney show that these negotiations are rarely overt. Instead, they operate through subtle cues: who eats first, who is offered extra portions, and who is expected to give up their tray. Inmates learn quickly that these small acts carry high social stakes. In a U.S. medium-security prison, one inmate described how a single shared dessert could solidify trust with a gang leader. Conversely, hoarding or refusing to trade even small commissary items could provoke social isolation or targeted intimidation. These daily exchanges are a form of microdiplomacy, where survival hinges on reading social cues, predicting reactions, and acting strategically. In the UK, Ministry of Justice case studies reveal that even mundane choices, like splitting a portion of rice or passing along a sandwich, can reinforce loyalty, debt, or submission. Inmates constantly assess who owes favors, who can be trusted, and who holds power in the social hierarchy. Food becomes a symbolic language, communicating alliance, defiance, or compliance. Australia presents a similar pattern. Corrective Services research notes that scarce resources create informal hierarchies, with inmates leveraging food to negotiate protection, access to recreational areas, or even influence over work assignments. These small negotiations build a complex web of social contracts, which, although unofficial, are rigorously enforced within the prison culture. Psychologically, this environment produces heightened social intelligence. Inmates learn to anticipate others' motives, control their emotional responses, and adapt behavior to survive. As the Chicago Crime Lab describes, this is a form of situational mastery, a mental skill set forged under the pressure of scarcity, competition, and constant observation. By understanding these micropolitical dynamics, we see that prison life under gang-controlled food systems is not just a matter of survival. It is a continuous exercise in strategic social maneuvering. Every meal is a test of judgment, loyalty, and resilience, shaping inmate psychology in ways that extend far beyond the prison walls. Psychological contradictions. Life after the ripple fades. Even after meals are eaten, commissary trades completed, and gang dynamics momentarily stabilized, the psychological effects of food-based control linger. Both inmates and officers carry contradictory emotions and behaviors shaped by the environment they've navigated. Inmates often experience a paradoxical blend of resilience and hypervigilance. Years of navigating scarcity and social hierarchies leave them capable of extraordinary mental adaptation, yet they remain conditioned by fear and mistrust. Former U.S. federal inmates interviewed in NIJ studies describe leaving prison with a persistent need to calculate social exchanges and anticipate scarcity, even in fully safe, resource-abundant environments. Officers, too, live with contradictions. They enforce rules in a system where informal inmate hierarchies dominate, sometimes relying on gang compliance to maintain order. As Haney and Irwin note, officers witness power dynamics they cannot fully control, creating a tension between authority, empathy, and professional detachment. The result is a psychologically charged environment where both sides must constantly negotiate survival, influence, and restraint. Across the US, UK, and Australia, the ripple effects of food-based control extend far beyond the prison walls. Mental health professionals, including researchers at the Chicago Crime Lab, emphasize that the skills and adaptations forged in scarcity can persist post-incarceration, influencing social behavior, ethical decision-making, and emotional regulation. In some cases, these adaptations foster resilience. In others, they reinforce patterns of mistrust and anxiety. Ultimately, the psychology of prison life under gang-controlled food systems reveals a profound truth. Survival is never just physical, it is strategic, social, and mental. Food becomes both a tool of power and a lens through which we can understand the complexity of human behavior under extreme conditions. What inmates eat, who controls it, and how they navigate scarcity is more than just a story about meals. It's a window into human behavior at its most extreme. Gangs, social hierarchies, and survival strategies illustrate the delicate interplay between power, psychology, and adaptation. If you found this exploration revealing, shocking, or eye-opening, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Every week, we dive deep into real-life prison dynamics, criminal psychology, and untold stories that expose the hidden truths of incarceration worldwide. Your subscription helps uncover more verified, high-impact content, giving you access to insights few people ever see, and keeping you ahead of the story. Don't just watch, join the investigation.